Welcome into yet another edition of Next Level Inside Carolina's show that Greg and I do. Goes a little deeper than your normal X's and O's and game day stuff. That's Greg Barnes. I'm Tommy Ashley, sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity, and of course, the man in the middle, Ted Monachino, North Carolina's defensive line coach. Coach, how you doing today?
Doing great, Tommy. Thank you guys for having me on.
Yeah, we appreciate you coming on. It's always fun to talk to you guys in sort of a less, I don't want to say stressful, but a different setup than a press conference. So appreciate you taking the time to join us here today. I do want to ask a question that I think I probably asked in one of your press conferences in the past, and that's the change from the college or from the pro game that you were in for so very long to the college game. Just sort of tell folks so they understand the difference. What is the biggest difference from you coaching professionals versus coaching now some well paid but still
Yeah,
college athletes?
yeah. That window is starting to narrow a little bit, just simply because of the fact that some of these guys are making some money, which we're all into that. We think that's a great thing for our game and for our players, and those guys that have that advantage, we're really happy for them. But the biggest difference that I would say is, number one, the players are a little bit older, which makes a difference, right? These guys are young kids and young men, and they're in the process of becoming something that 3 years from now may look a lot different than what they are right now. So the patience it takes to coach at this level is a little bit different. The But the rewards are greater because guys can get further and further in a shorter period of time. The guys that you coach in pro football, at that point, you're really not trying to remake many players. What you're trying to do is add tools to their toolbox and give them other ways that they can be better situationally or from a technique standpoint. But these guys, they're pretty blank slates, and you can start about anywhere you want and make a lot of improvement in a short time. The one thing that is, I got this question the first time I went into the NFL from college. It was the same question, just in the other direction. And I remember as I answered the question, I thought, well, what's the biggest difference? And it's recruiting, and it's academics, and it's parents, and it's all of those things that you don't have so much to deal with in pro football. But at this stage in my career, I'm enjoying those things. Yeah, there's a lot of balls to keep in the air, but I'm just the man for the job, and couldn't be more excited about the opportunity to help guys grow in a lot of different areas. I know in pro football, yeah, it's harder to influence a lot of the personal side of it. In college football, it's a little bit easier to do that. So, really enjoying working with the younger players, but there's a different set of challenges that we have to deal with every day, and believe me, we deal with them every day. And that's the only way we can handle it, is by dealing with them and trying to help them every single day with everything that comes across our desk and everything that comes into their lives.
So let me sort of build off that and ask a question. This is one I'm always curious about. When you're coaching professional athletes, they are in fact making a lot of money, and your career, there were probably some that weren't too terribly different than your age. Now
Right.
you're more of a father figure. I know that's well overused in college athletics, but it is to a certain extent. How do you quote unquote deal with those issues based on who you're dealing with, age wise,
Yeah.
maturity wise, and all that?
Yeah. I think that the thing with pro football players is there's a couple things that they're looking for. Number one, are you good enough to help them win a championship? Number two, are you good enough to teach them enough things to make their game better that they can stay in the league longer and make money? Those are really important to pro football players. To these guys, um, because of my experience at that level, I think I've got a little bit of expert power, that they tend to listen a little bit more intently than if I hadn't had that experience. I will tell you, um, I don't think that any. I know that I have not received one phone call from a guy on a Friday night at 9 o'clock wanting me to go out with them. So they don't need a 57-year-old friend, I promise you. So they're all into getting coached, and they all want to get better. And I think that just simply because I've got some scars and got a few pelts on the wall. I think that um, I have I have a really good rapport with my guys, and they have never been coached this way before. It's not a me thing. It's not a it's an us thing. And my only focus is on how do I get each guy closer and closer to his ceiling, and get him into a position where he can help us win games and help his career long term. And I think that our guys really appreciate that right now. And the beauty of it is because I've done enough that I get questions from a lot of different people, a lot of different position groups, both sides of the ball, and I've enjoyed that part of it. So being an older guy is a blessing in my opinion, in that I do have enough experience and enough background that and enough variety in my career that guys know that hey, if there's one guy that I could ask a variety of questions, maybe he's the guy, and I've enjoyed that part of it.
Coach, you mentioned maybe at the pro level, it's more about polishing guys and adding a few things to their toolbox. Um, at this level, as you're trying to find kids to come in, you really are trying to figure out, okay, what's this kid have that I can build upon? And, is he kind of the diamond in the rough type? What is it that you're looking for when you go to these camps or you host these camps at UNC's campus?
Yeah.
That maybe are one or two things that you think really stand out and project forward.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. The one thing that I will tell you is, with those NFL guys and evaluating those guys that in whether it's in free agency or in the draft, I was not a guy that believed in traits, right? I just because a guy had certain traits, if a guy had, there's a whole bunch of 6'4", 250-pound guys on the planet. There are. Some of them have a knack for rushing the passer and stopping the run game. Some of them don't. So traits weren't enough for me. It was all about the football player. The difference in evaluating guys for this level compared to evaluating guys in the NFL is I do have to pay a really close attention to the traits. Number one, can a guy physically do the things we're asking him? We're asking those guys at that position to do. Number two, does he have growth potential? Number three, does he have some position flexibility? Because if a guy has great growth potential, you never know. You may take a 6'3", 225-pound kid, and then 18 months later, he's a 6'3", 295-pound kid. So you've got to be able to weigh some of those things out. But at the end of the day, what I really look for is the football player makeup, right? Does he have high football character? And you can tell that on tape. Is he smart, tough, effort-filled, a great teammate? And by the way he plays, does he look like he loves the game? And you can tell that all those things on tape. So I have to pay more attention to traits at this level. At that level, I could just simply look at the black and white of this is the football player. This one is a guy with a high ceiling, but only had 3.5 career sacks in college. So I've got to look at now the 6'4", 215-pound guys a lot harder than I would have ever had to look at them in pro football, because those guys are men without a country at that stage, right? You got to have certain things that it takes to play those positions in pro football that you just don't know what some of these guys are going to be from the time they're 16 to the time they're 19, right? So you have to pay close attention to, does he play the way you like him to play? Can he do the things physically that you're going to ask him to do, right? Whether it be in the run game or in the pass rush or even in some of the under coverage stuff. And number three, does he look like he loves ball enough to commit to being great? And if he does those things, then if he's a good enough student to compete academically at UNC, then he's a guy that I need to take a close look at.
Coach, you did some college coaching, both at the FCS and the FBS level, 20, 25 years ago. And that was a great layout that you just provided. And we talk so much this year, last couple of years, about how the college game has changed with NIL and with the increase of analysts coming in, all these different things. But what you just said sounds a lot like what coaches 25 years were telling me. From a coaching standpoint, Has that much changed in terms of what you're doing on the recruiting trail? I mean, it's ultimately about getting guys that you can coach up, right?
And I think there's a lot that's changed. Number one, the world is so much smaller now than what it was 25 years ago. It's funny, when I first got this job, coach, showed me where my recruiting area was, and a long time ago when I was at James Madison, I had the same recruiting area. I had a lot of Eastern North Carolina, New Bern and Havelock, and some of those schools way out by the coast. And I remember driving from the Tidewater area in Virginia down the coast to North Carolina. And I, number one, didn't have a cell phone. Number two, was using MapQuest directions to get everywhere I was going. So that part of it has changed a lot. Okay. The other part that's changed a lot is film is available immediately. When guys put tape on the internet through Huddle, you have access to that film immediately. So the reason that it's changed so much is now it used to be, it was all done geographically at the front end, right? So I had my area. I had all the players at all the different positions in my area. So if I had an offensive lineman I liked, I took that offensive lineman's film, a hard VHS tape, back to the office, gave it to the O-line coach. He gave it to the offensive coordinator. The offensive coordinator gave it to the head coach, and then we could move on. Well, now the tape is immediate. So if I have an offensive lineman that I see out in my area, I just call Randy and I say, "Hey, coach, you need to take a look at this kid from this high school. I'm just here watching practice, and he's a really good player." There's so many other things that now play into the recruiting part of it because the world is smaller and because of NIL. We are the reason that NIL is so important is because, for instance, a kid from let me pick a random town, a kid from Olathe, Kansas, right, which is in Kansas City, Kansas, that decides he's going to play at, give you another one, at the University of Maryland. He's going to play at the well, there was a day when that kid would not choose to go to the University of Maryland because his family could never see him play at the University of Maryland. Well, now with NIL and some of the advantages that these kids have, maybe he makes enough money to fly his family to see him play at the University of Maryland. So those are all those are all the balls that I have to keep in the air. Yeah. Would I love to have this guy? Sure. Do I think we have the inside track on him because he's a guy that's close enough that his family can see him play all of his games? Yes. But at the end of it, somebody could come in and say, well, your family can see you play here too, because we're going to give you this amount of money to get your parents to every game. So those are all different things that we have to manage now that we never had to manage before. Usually, if a guy had a real close tie to your university, then you had a great chance of getting him. Now, because everybody can get to everyone in a hurry, you've got to do a great job on the front end, and you've got to continue to love those kids up all the way until December. I know that we just finished this recruiting period in June and had all those guys in on their visits, and there's a whole bunch of guys that are committing. But as we all know, it's a long ways till December, and signing day doesn't come until December, and nothing is binding until that letter of intent gets signed. And it's just a strange time, but it's a really exciting time, and it's interesting and fun. And sometimes it's frustrating, but man, when it works out, it's great.
So when whether it's recruiting guys or coaching guys on your current team, all football coaches always say, do they love ball? Tell me from your eyes and your background, what exactly that means when you're talking about a player either on your current roster or a high school guy, and how do you know? What tells you? Because I've always said, when people tell you who they are, believe them. How do you know that when you're recruiting and or coaching your own team?
Well, let's start with my guys now, right? The guys that love ball they want to get coached, right? They want to get better. They want to do things right. They want to lift and train and study and watch tape on their own and do all of those things. Guys that like ball, they just like it, right? They'll come to practice. They'll give you a great day's work, but they're not doing all the extra stuff that we just talked about. Guys that love ball are going to chase the ball even when they're tired. Guys that like ball, maybe they're going to put bad stuff on tape. You haven't played this game long enough if you haven't had your butt kicked every now and then. So that's not part of it. You're going to get your butt kicked. But the one thing about it is how do we respond? How do we rally? How do we correct mistakes, right? Guys that love ball, you can coach those guys harder because they want to be great. Guys that like ball, those are the guys that sometimes you try to get the 15 to 20 snaps a game out of them that you can because they're talented. But you also know that that's not the group of guys, or that's not the set of players that are going to take your program to the places that you want it to go. And I think that love and ball is something that shows up when a guy makes a play, right? Do his teammates come to him and celebrate with him? Or when somebody else makes a play, does he go celebrate with that teammate? I think those are things that I look for. And I know that I think there's two different kinds of effort. I think there's championship effort, and I think there's losing effort. And if there's championship effort on tape, then I know a guy loves ball.
Are those coachable traits? Coachable? Can you coach that, what you just talked about, into somebody, or do they just have it?
I think that instinct is not coachable. I think that what we just talked about is absolutely coachable. Now, I think that some guys will hit a ceiling at some point, and they say, this was fun while it lasted, but I know that at some point this game's going to push me out, and it does to all of us, right? It did it to Ray Lewis after 19 years, and it did it to a whole bunch of guys. So it's not anything that to be ashamed of, that the game kicks you out of it, at 24 years old. But I will tell you is the guys that love it have a tendency to prolong it a little longer.
Coach, with Jeff Collins coming in, how do things change for you in terms of how you communicate with the guys, whether it be technique, whether it be, kind of the changes that Jeff wants to implement that maybe Gene didn't? What's that process like for you?
Well, I think the biggest thing is number one, we're all aligned. Our staff is aligned. And that's not to say that it wasn't before, but the reason, to go to your question, for me, it doesn't change because we're aligned. And I'm not an independent contractor. We can have hard conversations, and we can bounce things off of each other. And the most important thing for us as a staff is to settle on the best practices, right? What's the best way for us to execute this call in this situation? And when we all have a voice, that makes things a lot better, because I'm not the expert at cornerback play, right? Jason Jones is. So I need Jason's input when I have a cornerback question, right? And I need Charlton's input and Tommy's input when I have a question about their position groups. And I think that with Jeff, he has been really great at, and I think this is an important phrase, Jeff is a consensus builder, right? So what we're trying to do in our room is build consensus about what the best way is to attack a technique, to attack a certain call and structure and concept, and to attack the offenses that we're going to play in 2024. The thing that I'm not going to change, I coach the way I coach, but what I am going to change is I'm going to be aligned with our staff and what we're doing. It's from a defensive standpoint, it's all about language. It's all about structure and concept. I've done a lot of things in the past. I've done a lot of things very similar to what we're doing now here, but I've got to learn new language, and I've got to learn new ways of thinking, and that's the fun and exciting and challenging part for me. But it's been a dream. Our staff, our defensive staff, and the way we work with our offensive staff has been so good through the spring, and I think it's because we do have a variety of guys that have a variety of communication styles, and I think that we can have hard conversations and come up with the best answer possible based on the input of 15 guys instead of the input of 3 or 4, which is a big deal.
We're going to ask you a couple personnel questions. Before we do that, I wanted to ask, we get this question a lot, so I just wanted you to have the opportunity to answer it. When you came in last year, I know there was some initial talk that maybe analysts would be allowed to coach on the field. That ultimately didn't go through last year. So what exactly was your role last year working with Tim Cross and the defense? And how did that kind of set the table for you to make a seamless transition into this role now?
Well, I'll start with the end of the question. Number one, the way it set the table was I was able to build relationships with those players, right? And I was able to build some trust with the staff that remained. Okay, so that was the easy part of it, right? Because being around, 100 hours a week, you're going to cross paths with a lot of people, and you're going to have to build some relationships. So that part made that transition really easy. My role specifically was, I'm not a numbers guy. I still believe that there's a lot more art to this game than science. So the term analyst is a little bit of a misnomer, in my opinion. What I did is I tried to present as many great ideas as I could, and different ways to skin the same cat as I could. Gene and I went through everything from the red area to clock management at the end of the half and at the end of the game to goal line and short yardage stuff that we had done. And I had playbook pages and NFL tape to back all the things that we did. So that was my role mostly. As we got into the season, then my role was more, I'm going to do these 4 or 5 things during the course of the week that are going to I'm going to try to help streamline the process while the play clock's running. Okay. So there's a lot of things to think about while the play clock's running before the call comes out, right? Down and distance, personnel. Is the ball in the hash or in the middle? Are they across midfield? All those things, the 4-down territory things. So what I tried to do is I tried to give Gene as much information on the front end as I possibly could to try to simplify that for him. My specific role in the defensive line room with Tim is I was just an extra voice of reason. I sat in the back of the room and Tim and Cam ran the meetings, and I would take a lot of notes during the course of the meeting. And as soon as the players walked out, if Tim or Cam had any questions for me, I'd answer. And then if I had any suggestions, I would give them at that time, because that was the rule and that was the role. So watching a lot of tape, I spent a lot of time on my word processor and on Excel and on all the PowerPoint and everything I could to try to make it as simple as I could for everybody involved. And hopefully there were some times that they were able to use some of the information that I gave them. And at that point and in that role, they could choose to use it or not use it. And that was totally up to them. And I still have a great deal of respect for all those guys, whether they chose to use my information or not.
It's the old suggestions versus decisions type deal there. Yeah. That a lot of head coaches that or weren't head coaches to start with. So let me ask you, you're in that role last year. Whatever goes down, and now you're the guy. You're making the decisions in the defensive line room. What's been the toughest part of that? And with the players themselves, you had an opportunity to see them for a couple of years now. Everybody talks about Travis Shaw. Everybody says it's an immense talent. He's just got to unlock it and all that kind of stuff. Just sort of talk about the aspect of coaching individual guys and getting them to do what you want them to do when it comes to the field this year.
That part's been easy. Okay, the getting them to do what I want. We had a really good spring in our room. We made a quantum leap in a lot of areas, but the hardest thing, Tommy, in my opinion, is trying to find roles for all those really good football players, right? We got to find a role for Jacoby Cowan, right? How many guys would love to have a 6'4", 280-pound kid that can run like that, right? We got to be able to find a role that Javari Ritzie can make his share of plays, because he's got some playmaking ability, but we can't play him too much, because then if we play him too much, then it's going to take away those plays that he does make. How do we manage Des Evans versus Bo Atkinson, right? Those are difficult things, because they both had dominant stretches during spring practice, and they both have dominant stretches during fall camp. I'll guarantee it. So my biggest thing now is how do we find ways to manage between Kevin Hester, Josh Harris, Javari Ritzie, and Travis Shaw? How do we manage those 4 into two dominant players for 60 straight minutes. How do we manage those four to create two great players for 60 straight minutes? And that's our charge. Those outside guys, it's very similar, right? The problem right now that we run into is you got Dez and Bo and Jacoby all on the same place at the depth chart. On the other side, you got Kamen Rucker, you've got Jabron Harvey and Tyler Thompson and a bunch of really good players. So what we got to do is we got to figure out what roles and what personnel groupings and what systems of calls can we find a way to get our best 11 on the field at all times. So that's been the hardest thing for me, is to try to figure out, okay, this is a call or this is a situation where we need three outside linebacker body types on the field. This is a situation or call that we need three big thumper thug guys on the field, right? This is a situation where we need a guy that's really good in the coverage. So finding roles without yo-yoing guys in and out of the ball game, because tempo is a problem in college football. So we've got to figure out, how do we work them in practice to prepare them for the things that we're going to ask them to do on game day and still get everybody the work that they need. So that's a good problem to have, right? When I've got more than four good players, I've got something that I need to work through. And the guys are earning their roles and they're earning their reps in practice. And as different dominant traits start to rear their heads, then we'll have a better feel for what it is that we're going to do with them. That's been the most difficult thing.
You've been listening to Inside Carolina's Next Level with Greg Barnes and Tommy Ashley. Special thanks to the coaches that have joined us, but I also want to take a second to talk about our sponsors, Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. JohnnyT-Shirt.com and Johnny T-Shirt on East Franklin Street, your place to go to get your Inside Carolina gear. They've got all the swag. Football season's almost here. They've got the football jerseys. They've got NIL stuff. They've got the throwback white North Carolina football jerseys that are straight fire. If you're a jersey person, get your jerseys at Johnny T-Shirt. And if you're an Inside Carolina Premium subscriber, which if you're not, I suggest you do that ASAP, because the season's here. Recruiting, basketball, football, all of that stuff falls under Inside Carolina's Premium subscription. And you get 10% off your Johnny T-Shirt order, either online or in person. Go see them. They're great folks. Or get with them online. Whatever you need, they take care of you for all your Carolina wants. Also, Congruity, congruityhr.com/Tar Heels. If you're a small to mid-sized business owner, you need to go to that link. You need to do their free assessment and let Darren and Matt's team, which is a local-based business that has blown up into a national-based business, you need to let them check out your business model, what you need, what they can do to help you, and then they can work with you and take care of all your needs as a business owner. They handle everything. You handle the business. They handle HR, their community service, their customer service, their technology, all you need at congruityhr.com/Tar Heels. Free assessment for Inside Carolina folks. Can't beat it, folks. And now back to the Next Level interviews. One thing that Mack's talked about for years, and it doesn't really show up as much on the defensive line, maybe with Rucker, but managing snap counts. And is this guy good at 20 snaps, and is he better than somebody else at 40 snaps? How do you envision that when you've got to manage it into those two guys that you mentioned,
Right.
4 to 2?
Well, I think that at the end of fall camp, we will. So Coach does a great job of having a blue team, which he considers starter quality players that you can play at any point in the game or at any place on the field. Then there's a group of guys that are the white team, and the white team are guys that are 15 to 20 snap a game guys. And then there's the gray team, who are backup guys that can be on special teams, but probably still on the bus to go to road games, all of those guys. Okay. So we're trying to drive up the number of guys that we consider on the blue team. And when we do that, then we've got, let's say we have 18 guys on defense that we consider our blue team players. Well, those 18 guys all need a role, right? So finding those guys roles and finding them ways to get that done, that takes then some reps off of the other guys. The one thing I will tell you is at the end of fall camp, somebody's going to trot out there first for the first snap against Minnesota. Those guys, those starters, whoever those four are, those 4 guys are going to take the starter's share of the reps. Okay. And if the starter's share of the reps is 40%, and then the other blue team guy is 30%, and then the second blue team guy is the other 30%, great. But at the end of the day, we're going to do everything we can to make sure we've got 11 really good football players on the field at the same time, all the time, without putting the other 10 at risk by having a guy that really doesn't belong in the certain situation. And then, we build different packages and different roles and different situations. And that's another way to keep guys involved in the planning.
Coach, before we let you get out of here, it sounds like you've got a lot of pieces that you like, and there's a lot of flexibility there. Can you kind of just give us a quick general overview of the personnel that you have and guys that you think have really shown you something this offseason?
Sure, absolutely. We'll just go across the depth chart. So at one end, we've got our 3 bigger guys, right? Dez, Bo, and Jacoby. And we've got 2 guys that have some position flexibility, that flip-flop back and forth from outside linebacker from the rush backer side over to that end side. And those are Jabron Harvey and Daniel Anderson. Okay, so with those 5 guys, I've got 5 really good football players. I've got 3 that are a little closer to being developed in a place where we think they're viable every snap. And then those 2 crossover guys are guys that it's important to have some position flexibility, and those guys are really valuable to us because we break 2 chin straps in the course of a game. We're going to need those guys to take some reps over there. That group, including those 2 crossover guys, Jabron and Daniel, that's a really strong group. I feel like we've got 3 starter quality players there, and I think we've got 2 guys that if the world fell apart, that we could get in there and we could survive in those 2 crossover guys. The next guy would be that first position inside, and that is manned by Javari Ritzie and Travis Shaw and Rodney Laura and Leroy Jackson. Those guys are playing that defensive tackle position right now. And then, we've got a couple of young guys that cross-train in there. So that group is a group that's a little bit more of a group in progress because Travis we're cross-training Travis from the nose to the D tackle. And he's getting reps at both spots. Javari Ritzie gets cross-trained at D tackle and at defensive end. So he gets reps at both spots. Rodney Laura is still young without any experience. And then, of course, Leroy is a true freshman, hasn't played. So that's a position group that we feel really good about. We feel strongly about. But we also know that there's some unknown there. We don't know exactly what Travis is going to be as a 3 technique. Knowing what he is as a nose tackle helps, but knowing what he can be as a 3 technique is a little bit up in the air, and we're going to get a good hard look at him during fall camp. At the next inside position, at the nose tackle position, and again, these guys just play defensive tackle at the end of the day. Sometimes they're in 3s, sometimes they're in head-up 2s, sometimes they're in the A-gap. Des Evans, for gosh sakes, lined up everywhere from the outside edge of a tight end all the way to a 0 nose in the spring. So they line up everywhere, which is a beautiful thing. But that nose tackle group, that's Kevin Hester and Josh Harris and Joel Starlings and Peter Pazanski and we've got a couple other young guys, but and then we cross train obviously Travis. But that group is as strong a group as we have. That you can put that group right next to our defensive end group with experience and having a stack of really good players. We have a stack of really good players at that 3 technique spot with Javari and Travis and Joel and Rodney, but we just don't have a lot of experience as game wreckers at the 3 technique position. Okay, then you move to that rush linebacker spot, which in the past that's been a position that has been a little bit of a tweener. We're moving in a direction where that position becomes more and more defensive end-ish and less linebacker-ish. For instance, we all think Cayman's a really good player. And Cayman is 260 pounds. Okay, so the days of the 6'2", 215-pound guy, those are going the way of the Buffalo. But in that group, you've got Kamen and Jabron and Tyler Thompson and Malachi Hamrick. You've got Curtis Simpson, Daniel Anderson, cross trains there and at defensive end. So we think that we've got a really good player there, obviously, right? People think that Kamen is a really good player, and we would agree with that. We think he's a really good player. But the beauty there is we've got a bunch of really good ascending young players behind him. We've got big where we need to be big. We've got strong where we need to be strong, fast where we need to be fast, and smart where we need to be smart, which is what I think is that's good football team, right? And across our front, we've got the things that we need to be competitive and to be successful against the teams that we play. As you guys both know, this game is still won and lost up front. It's still about blocking and getting off of blocks. It's still about effort, and it's still about violence and being able to play through things that normal humans would stay home from work for. But we feel really good about our group, and I feel great about where we are with them. I know that Jimmy Lindsay and Cam Spence are both really good football coaches that help me with detail and help me with time management and all the things that come into play when you're talking about a room with close to 20 players in it. There's a lot of balls to keep in the air, but I think having those two guys, not only having their support, but having their expertise on board, I think has made a huge difference in how the room gets coached. And I'm really thrilled. I can't wait to get started. The beauty of it is we're about 10 days out, and all the guys are still here. They're in the process right now of becoming something really special, I think.
So what have you gotten to do non-football related this summer? I mean, ball is ball.
Yeah. It's funny you ask that, because there was a time when there's a big difference between visiting and vacation, right? So we went through a lot of years when we were a younger family and we had all of our kids in the house, and that it was all based on visiting, right? We had to go to the grandparents. We had to go see the aunts and uncles. They had to come see us. So visiting was a big part of it before. Visiting now involves my wife, Amy, and I going to Iowa and seeing our grandkids and our daughter, McKaylee, and her husband, Preston. And she's got another one on the way. It's going to be any day now. And when that baby's born, McKaylee and Preston will have 4 under the age of 6. So Woo. It is a zoo in their home, but it is a perfect zoo. So we did that for a week. And then I went back to our home in Atlanta for the other week and a half, and played a lot of golf and hung out with my son, Michael, a lot. Our son, Sam, is here coaching helping us coach our quarterbacks. So he came back a week earlier than I did, but Michael and I got to spend a lot of great time together, and loved my vacation time, but really excited to be back. But played a lot of golf, hung out in our house, and watched a lot of movies with our filmmaker. Michael is going into his junior year at SCAD. He's a film major at SCAD, studying. He wants to be Francis Ford Coppola, for gosh sakes, and wants to make monster movies, and he's doing a great job. And so anytime I can sit and watch movies and listen to Michael's perspective on movies with him, that's a lot of fun for me. So that's what I did.
That's pretty awesome. Four under 6 or a room full of 20 defensive linemen. I'm not sure the tougher job there, really.
Yeah, both of them. There's a handful of both of those.
Coach Monachino, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. Appreciate you being so gracious with your time with Greg and myself. Look forward to seeing what the defensive line does this year, because like you said, and like everybody says, it starts there for North Carolina in 2024.
Well, thank you so much, guys. Greg and Tommy, I really appreciate you having me on, and feel free to reach out anytime.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Thank you, guys.
That has been an edition of Next Level with Coach Ted Monachino, defensive line coach. That's Greg Barnes. I'm Tommy Ashley. We'll talk to everybody next time.